Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I am going to be readdressing a topic that I first discussed about 3 years ago, and yet somehow there's still controversy surrounding it, and the controversy is about the exact same thing. You know what, it's not even controversy because there's nothing wrong with the thing, it's just people being ignorant douchebags. Today we're talking about The Little Mermaid. So as we all know, Disney have been remaking a bunch of their animated classic films as live action remakes for a few years now, and their reason for this is stuff and things and money. I haven't seen all the live action remakes that they've done, but the ones that I have seen have kind of been a bit boring, to be honest. It's a shame because like Beauty and the Beast is one of my favourite Disney films ever, and so is Aladdin is my absolute favourite of all time. I am obsessed. So when I saw the live action remakes for those, I was like, oh my god, I was very, very excited. They looked stunning, they looked beautiful. I thought the casting was perfect in both of them, and that's the thing. I have no complaints about the cast, the actors, nothing like that. I just found them a bit bland. I was like, oh, okay. The music kind of felt flat. I didn't like Will Smith as the genie in Aladdin. I felt like the Beast in Beauty and the Beast was just like, nah. And I don't know, the whole thing just kind of bored me a bit, and I don't think I've ever got through those films in one go. I always fall asleep in them at some part and then have to wake up and rewind, and it's just, yeah. I think if I'm gonna watch those films, I'm just gonna watch the animated originals because they're better, they're more fun, they're more engaging. I like them more. The only exception I have to say is Cinderella, which is kind of different and separate to all the others because it was the first one that they did. Disney had a very sort of different vision for it, and I thought it was absolutely perfect. It was a beautiful film. Oh my god, can we talk about Cinderella's dress? That was stunning. I thought Lily James' Cinderella was perfect, and also I just adore her. I think she's wonderful. I think the casting in the rest of the film was wonderful. I think it was a lovely story. It was very engaging. I loved the script. I loved the music and the soundtrack. And even though it wasn't a musical like the original Cinderella was, I liked that about it. I thought that the music they did use was beautiful. And I just find it a very comforting film. And I would say it's up there as one of my favourite ever Disney films because it's one of the ones that I put on when I'm in like a bit of a sad place and I just need a hug in a film form, you know? I watch live action Cinderella, I watch animated Aladdin, and my comfort films, you know? Beautiful. 3 or so years ago, maybe more at this point, I'm not actually sure, Disney announced that they were going to be remaking one of my all-time favourite Disney films, The Little Mermaid. Although not my all-time favourite, it's up there, you know, I would say it's... Ooh. I'd say it's top 5. When Disney announced live action The Little Mermaid, they also announced that Ariel, the main character, would be played by Halle Bailey, which is cool, right? She seems great, good actress, amazing voice, beautiful woman. What's the problem? But apparently there is a problem, because mostly a bunch of grumpy old white men on the internet apparently claim it's not natural for a mermaid to be black. Mate, she's a mermaid. They're not natural beings. So anyway, I made a video back in about 2019 addressing all this, and in it I covered like the history of mermaid myths and actually talked about how a lot of mermaid myths originated in Africa. So actually it's really, really normal and common for depictions of mermaids throughout history to be black. And anyone who claims otherwise is just an ignorant racist potato. Now that all of this like racist shouting and posturing has come about again, I was just going to reshare that original video, but I rewatched it and decided I'd much rather remake something that's a little more polished, that has a little bit more additional information, and also talk a little bit about what's been happening now, because the racist stuff has got a lot worse, and I want to address that and talk about why it is not okay. My original video was alright, it was okay, the information in it was good, but I just honestly thought it could be better. And that's okay, because I've had 3 years of making videos in that time, and you grow, you learn, you improve, and that's completely normal. So before we jump into the bulk of this video, just a few little bits of shameless self-promotion. You may have seen over on Instagram, I have been painting beetles recently. I am obsessed with beetles for some reason. I've been painting lots and lots of watercolour ones, and if you like insects, beetles, watercolour paintings, you can get prints of these two beauties over in my print store right now at richlots.uk/shop, or if you want to get these on merch, I have these available either as single large prints on t-shirts and hoodies, or on t-shirts I have a really cool all over print of both of these beetles. You can get the green one, the blue one, I love them both. I'm really excited for these designs. These were so much fun to paint, they were so much fun to make, and then putting them onto the merch and coming up with the designs, I loved it. I had so much fun with it. So if you'd like to get those, they're available over in my print store and on my merch store now. The links will be down in the video description. They'll also be on screen, floating around at some point here, so you can check them out if you want. And also, second little thing is you may have seen, or maybe not, because it's not really had a big audience yet, but I've just released my first ever spoken word poetry video. I say first ever, I put a couple out on Patreon that were just kind of like testing the waters, seeing what it was like and getting a little bit of feedback and stuff. But this is my first ever like properly recorded performance type one, and it's for a poem of mine called Room, which is about my choice to be child free, and also just about sort of like the reproductive rights of women and everyone who was assigned female at birth, basically everyone with a uterus, and how a lot of people try and control us, shame us, and all these different factors, and ultimately how it's our choice and we shouldn't be shamed into doing anything we don't want to do with our bodies, and kind of at the end coming to accept that this is my body, I love it, and it's mine to do with what I want. So I've released a poem about that. It is called Room. You can go watch it now. It's about 4.5 minutes long. This is the poem that I performed at Glastonbury this year, so it's a really, really special one to me, and it's one that I think is a really important message. So I would love if you want to go watch it, check it out, tell me what you think, and if you like it, it would be wonderful if you were to share it around on social media and stuff like that, and yeah, I appreciate it all, thank you. I also have 2 more poetry videos coming out over the next few weeks. The other 2 are a lot shorter, they're slightly more personal, but again, I'm very excited but very nervous to share them with you, so if you want to see those, please subscribe and you'll get a notification, hopefully, when they're released. So, all that out the way, thank you so much, I appreciate you a hell of a lot. Let's get back to talking about the Little Mermaid. So let's begin by discussing how somehow, even though she was cast in this role 3 years ago, or maybe more at this point, people are still angry about the casting choice of Halle Bailey as Ariel. And mostly, I'll be honest, it's old white men. This is just like the pastor who got angry and intimidated by Louisa having muscles in Encanto, you know? Genuine question here. What is it with all these old men being incredibly invested in the young female characters in children's films? Why do they have so many problems with it? Back in 2019, there were a lot of people posting disgustingly racist tweets with the hashtag #NotMyAriel. But with the recent release of the latest Little Mermaid trailer, this has only got worse. It's kind of flared up again. Now that trailer for some reason has like 1 million dislikes. God knows why. It looks beautiful, but you know. Like, I've watched it. It's a short trailer. We really don't see much of the film or the storyline or anything. It's just some beautiful underwater shots. You see Ariel swimming around. You hear a little bit of singing. It's mostly just CGI swimming in water. We basically get one main shot of Halle Bailey as Ariel. It's like a sort of high-angle shot looking down at her. She's in the water looking up. We hear a little bit of her singing, and that's about it. And my first thoughts were just simply, oh, this is pretty, and damn, she has a good voice, because she does. Her voice is stunning. It's very, very easy to see why she was cast, because like Ariel as a character is meant to have this beautiful singing voice. She's meant to have like the most beautiful singing voice in the world, so like, yeah, I get it. Halle Bailey, fantastic choice for that. And yet somehow, like I say, this like, what is it, like a minute-long trailer or something, was enough to cause like crazy uproar, get 1 million dislikes. Why? One guy said on Twitter, "Good news for Disney, a huge amount of dislike. You reap what you sow. No wonder I will never waste my money for it." 1, oh my god, that grammar. And 2, yeah, let's hope you reap what you sow and get some comeuppance for being a racist douchebag. But seriously, like, I don't... 1, I don't get why there's so many dislikes, and 2, I don't see why this is a, ooh, that'll teach Disney right. Like, it's just some dislikes. They've probably made a crap ton of money off that trailer already. Even with all this controversy, they're going to make a crap ton of money off the film. They're not reaping what they... Well, no, that's the thing. There's nothing for them to be punished for. They haven't done anything wrong. And the thing is, like, for all this trailer has some, like, dislikes and stuff like that, have you actually seen the amount of positivity around it as well? Because there is a lot. I don't know if anyone's seen the videos of kids, you know, the actual target audience of the film. Shocking, I know. But have you seen the videos of kids being like super, super excited by it and like being like, oh my god, I can't wait to watch this, and loving it and just being in awe of it? Because I don't even like kids and it's adorable. Especially you have like the videos of black girls who are like really excited to see another Disney princess who looks just like them and who has hair like them and who they're like, oh my god, that could be me. I want to dress up as Ariel. I want, like, they're adorable videos. They're really, really, really cute. And I think people keep forgetting that's who this film is made for. Kids who want to see characters like themselves, who want to be excited by this like beautiful, stunning, talented princess, someone who they can relate to, someone who they can look up to. Like, I think people keep forgetting this. So yeah, the trailer has a few dislikes, but honestly, I think the good that it's doing and that this film in general is doing definitely outweighs the bad. And the reactions of those young girls and young women, to me, definitely outweighs the impact of a few YouTube dislikes from a few miserable old racists, you know? You have these young girls who are excited about, like, having a role model who looks like them and acts like them and, you know, who they can see themselves in. And then you have some grumpy old people who are mad about a kid's film. You see what I mean? Another person on Twitter said, not even angry, sad, or disillusioned anymore. Just numb. This is such an overreaction. Here's to another childhood classic ruined by Disney. It's a design aesthetic / branding consistency thang. Not only because of the race swap. Oh no, I'm sorry. Are you afraid that now Ariel is portrayed by a black woman, you're gonna get her mixed up with Disney's other prominent mermaid character? You know, oh wait, there isn't one. I'm sorry, but no, don't pretend you're motivated by brand consistency here. Like, that's not it at all. Say that all you want, but we all know it's racism. Simple as that. In a similar vein, this is ridiculous. I'm warning you now. Like, it's not even funny. It's that bad. So, this person here saw a lot of black women being like, hey, you know what, it's nice to have more representation, it's nice to have more black Disney princesses, this is great. Because up to this point, I think there is only Tiana, who again, I love, and she's one of my favourite ones, because like, she's like, I don't need a man, I don't care about that, I just want to start my own business. And when I saw that one, I was like, I think I was 19 or something, which I know is old, but I think when I saw that, I was like, damn! A Disney princess like me. I loved it. I love Tiana. Sorry, not the point. So I think this was actually a woman who wrote this, who she saw a bunch of black women and young black girls being like, hey, look, another Disney princess like me. It's nice to get some representation for people of colour and minorities and all this sort of thing. And this person had the audacity to reply with, and please take note of the bad grammar, you're not part of a minority like redheads. We are 2% and grew up with Ariel representing us. Hollywood barely uses redhead actresses, only uses blondes, and dye their hair. So forgive us for wanting ourselves represented. Hailey? Sorry, but you're hashtag not my Ariel. Be other mermaid. I'm sorry, but are you kidding? Not part of a minority? What rock have you been living under? Oh my god. And also, this might be a controversial opinion, and I'm sorry to break this to you, but Ariel isn't ginger. Her hair is not a naturally occurring colour. It is bright postbox red. It's not ginger, it is red, and there is a difference there. Like, no human hair is the colour of Ariel's, so I'm sorry, but she's not representing a group of gingers here at all. Ariel's hair is an unnatural colour because she's not a human, she's a mermaid. If you want a ginger Disney princess, look at Merida from Brave. She's actually ginger. She's your representation. There you go. This is like saying that Stitch from Lilo and Stitch is representing all people with grey hair because his fur is blue. You see where I'm going with this? No, he's an alien, so he's got unnaturally coloured hair. He is a blue alien. Ariel is a bright red-haired mermaid. She's not a ginger woman. I know this is a really nitpicky thing to say, but it's true. She is a supernatural being, so casting directors, producers, everyone can make her look however the hell they want. Ariel being a mermaid, a different species, is part of her identity, not anything tied to her race. Take a princess like let's go with Tiana, because she is living in kind of like jazz age New Orleans. She's a young black woman trying to create a business for herself, living in a world where black women are trampled on and pushed down and not given the same opportunities. And she fights to get above that. She's like, no, I'm going to make something of myself. I'm going to do this. I'm going to fight the oppression. Her character, her identity is tied to her race and her background and her family history. And that is part of who she is. Look at another character like Jasmine in Aladdin. Again, living in Agrabah, she is part of this culture with the Sultan, and they have all these rules, and it's like, oh, my daughter must get married at 18, she must marry a prince, she must do this and this and this, and she's there fighting this political system, this oppression against women, and she's saying, no, I want to marry for love, I want to marry when I'm ready. Who says I have to marry a prince? I want to change the rules. And she fights and gets her dad to change the rules. Her father being the Sultan. She does that. And so in that case, it's less about her race at play there and more about kind of the political climate she's living in. That is tied to her character and her identity and all that stuff. Take Merida. She is traditionally Scottish, so she's a white woman with fiery ginger hair, and you have like the whole clan system and everything. And in that case, the whole like Scottish history and her race and her identity and her background is a key part of her character. So again, you couldn't make Merida be played by a black woman or a Chinese woman, or even I would say like a non-ginger woman, because that's all part of her identity and who she is. Whereas you take a character like Rapunzel from Tangled, Ariel in The Little Mermaid, you take Cinderella even, Aurora from Sleeping Beauty, and these characters don't have their race or appearance necessarily tied to any part of their character or their story. So I think you could have them played by absolutely anyone. The only physical characteristics you need are long hair for Rapunzel, or yeah, that's about it. that's about it. The rest of them can be played by anyone and should be able to be played by anyone. That's it. And then you have the most disgusting thing that I think's happened and what has prompted me to make this video. And that is there's a guy out there who used AI, in the words of him and his colleagues, to fix the trailer. Basically, they replaced all footage of Halle Bailey with a generic, fake-looking white woman. I mean, like, it's very clearly computer-generated. There aren't even women who look like this. It's like not an Instagram filter. Yeah, it's like an Instagram filter or a TikTok filter or like one of those face app filters, that's what it looks like. It doesn't even look like a real woman at this point. But they replaced all the footage of the actual actress with this fake, not real white woman. It is disgusting and it's unnecessary. And to make matters worse, they've then promised that they can fix the whole movie when it comes out. Fix it. Do they know how disgusting and offensive that language is? They can't be serious. This isn't just like subtle racism, it's not a little bit racist. This is overt racism, saying they need to fix black people to make them look white. That is racism, just out and out. And not only is it incredibly racist, but it is incredibly disrespectful to the actress. I think people forget that acting is an art form, and these actors, even the worst ones, which I'm sure Halle isn't, all actors spend countless hours preparing for their roles. They work on gestures, facial expressions, they rehearse for hours. And not only that, but huge numbers of people work on these films in terms of costume design, makeup, hairstyling. They make her appearance a very specific way. They light things in a very specific way to get their vision across. So much thought and time and effort and money goes into creating a piece of art like this, only for a man to come along and say, actually, I am going to cover this all up with someone that isn't even real, with a completely made up face and body, because I think I need to fix your work. It is disrespectful to filmmaking as an art form. It is disrespectful to every single artist that has worked on this film. It is disrespectful to the actress. And on top of all that, it is racist. If they took Halle and replaced her with another black woman, that would still be disrespectful. But because they're literally changing her race, it is racist and disrespectful. I don't know how many times I can say this. It's absolutely revolting. There's no other word for it. This isn't a feat of, oh, look how powerful AI is and what it can do. It's just revolting. It's literally people using really, really cool technology for a completely nefarious purpose. One final tweet I want to look at is this person who said, if Disney wants more diversity, they should have created another character. Before respecting all other ethnicities and cultures, shouldn't they at least be respectful to the origin? Many problems with this, to be honest. Now, I think we can all agree with this guy to some extent, in that I think we'd all like Disney to be creating more completely original films and less remakes, because at this point, it's a little samey. They're not really adding anything to it. Oh my god, remember that amazing era where, like, Disney had, like, a nice little resurgence, and we got, like, Tangled and The Princess and the Frog, and I think Frozen was at the end of that as well. Honestly, Frozen's my least favourite of all of them, but you know, that was a fantastic era. Like, the creative team there at Disney were just smashing out the hits one after the other. They were great. That was a good little resurgence era there. I'd like another one of those, you know? That said, you know, like, Encanto's been brilliant. I really enjoyed that and so on. But the point is, yeah, you know what? More original characters, please. I would like to see that. And I would like to see more diversity in the characters, which they absolutely are doing. I think that's fantastic. Great. Love it. But I don't think that's actually what this person was referring to at all. And I'm just going to remind you again, Ariel is a mermaid who lives in the sea. We don't know which sea, we don't know which ocean, she's not part of any kind of human culture. So which culture do you think we should be respecting? Which mermaid origin do you want this to actually reference? Because I can tell you now, the original animated Little Mermaid from the 80s is not the original mermaid story. And with that in mind, I think now is actually a really good time to talk about the specifics of mermaid myths, the history of mermaids, where they come from, and also the original Little Mermaid story that inspired the 1989 Disney film and the current live-action remake. Now, obviously there are a hell of a lot of mermaid myths out there, and I can't cover every single one in this video, although I wish I could. We would probably be here about 6 hours. So I'm going to give you a very, very, very brief rundown of a couple of my favourites. Nearly every single culture in the history of humanity has had some kind of mermaid myth. Stories of creatures who are part human, part fish, pretty much. Also other stories of people who are part human, part animal in some way, part human, part snake, part human, part crocodile, part human, part bird, cow, bull, horse, all these goats. You know, human-animal hybrids have been there forever. But human-fish hybrids, even if they weren't called mermaids at the time, we are talking like, what, 7,000 years old minimum. As far back as 5000 BC, the Babylonians told the story of the god Oates, who took the form of a fish when he was in water, but could transform to have the feet and head of a human when he needed to come to land, to interact with humans, to teach them things, to just, you know, do his job. There are also plenty of Chinese legends depicting mermaids as, and I quote, skilled beings whose tears could become pearls. Dating back 4,000 years and more, you also have a huge number of African mermaid myths, and I would say this is one of the like biggest, most varied group of mermaid myths out there. There are so many dating back from Africa. Like, it's incredible. The variety, the amount of stories, the variation, like, they're fascinating. So the Dogon people of Mali in West Africa had creation myths about an amphibious mermaid-like creature who lived in the water. Meanwhile, over in Zimbabwe, there were stories of mermaids with sharp fang-like teeth who, if you got too close to the water's edge, would pull you in. Over in Nigeria, the Yoruba culture had a goddess called Yemoja, Yemoja, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, whose name literally means fish mother. And she was a mermaid who was the mother of the sun, moon, water, and life. And she lived in one particular river in what is now Nigeria. But the story said that she could travel to any body of water in the world, even if it wasn't directly connected, and would do so to protect all women and children, which I think is absolutely beautiful. And what's really interesting is that over time, her story evolved. So the story became that eventually she would follow slave ships and offer comfort to those aboard, try to protect them, try to save them when she could. And if any died on the way, whether it was from the horrific conditions they were in, or if there was a shipwreck or something like that, it said that she would collect their souls from the water and return them home. And I think that's just absolutely beautiful. And it's a really good example of how stories can change and grow and evolve over time. Myths have always been evolving, you know? They're not just static. People needed hope in the face of something absolutely horrific, and this story kind of provided them with that. It gave them a sense of hope, of comfort, of feeling protected when they needed it most. I would say one of the most popular African myths is the story of Mami Wata, who would take the form of this beautiful, stunning, powerful woman with a long fishtail. There are different variations on this story, so in some of them she had a long snake tail that kind of curled up under her, in some of them it was a crocodile tail, but fish was the most common, hence she was kind of like this mother mermaid to all. As some stories of her were used to scare children into saying like, oh, don't get too near deep water, or Mami Wata will get you. Or, you know, stay away from strong currents, or she'll get you, that kind of thing. But mostly, again, but she was said to be a protector for women and children everywhere. You know, I think that's lovely. And in all the depictions of each of these mermaids that we have in art, in history, in different records, all of the depictions of them are black women. Black women as mermaids is basically the foundation of most of our mermaid myths. It is very, very common. It is very normal. So this incarnation of Ariel, portrayed by a black woman, is actually kind of going back to the origin even before the Hans Christian Andersen story, you know? It's going back to the origin of the origin. If anything, it's in some ways more authentic. There were some European stories of mermaids, and a lot of these had depictions of white women as mermaids and things like that. However, they aren't as old as many of the African myths. Mermaid myths didn't appear to be too widespread in Europe until around 800 BC, which, if you're any good with numbers, you might know is a lot later than 4000 BC. Crazy that, isn't it? Homer's Odyssey introduced us to the world of sirens, who were half women, half birds, who used to call out to sailors, sing to them, and eventually lure them to their deaths. It's thought that the story of sirens went on to influence other European mermaid myths, but also was influenced by other cultures' mermaid myths as well. Over time, the stories of these beautiful sirens with these stunning singing voices that lured men to their deaths evolved into stories of beautiful but dangerous women with the tails of fish also luring men to their deaths. A lot of sources suggest that as Christianity became more popular and more powerful, I guess you could say, it tried to quash mermaid stories in all cultures. Christian leaders labelled mermaids, instead of being protectors, as symbols of lust and temptation. And it's thought that Homer's Odyssey with the sirens played a big part in that reputation. Mermaids were seen as these creatures that were beautiful and appealing, but ultimately led to men's downfalls, which, let's be honest, is kind of how the church sees all women even today, you know? Remember, nothing scares a man more than a strong, powerful woman in control of her body and her sexuality. Eventually, the consensus became that mermaids were generally these beautiful and seductive creatures on their top halves, but could also be dangerous and cruel and were not to be messed with. Many stories showed their tempers changing in like a matter of seconds. You know, they'd be beautiful and calm and inviting one moment, and then raging and murderous the next. In a lot of ways, like the sea, mermaids were this personification of the ocean and the waters, and the beauty of it, but also the danger it could bring or cause as well. In more recent years, we've heard and read accounts of mermaid sightings by lots and lots of sailors. Some in particular were like John Smith and Christopher Columbus. Columbus said in 1493, near Haiti, he saw mermaids. He wrote in one of his journals that they were not as pretty as they're depicted, for somehow in the face they look like men. The thing is, with a lot of these sailors, you have to remember that these men had been at sea for weeks without women. They likely had a bunch of illnesses, maybe a bit of scurvy, they were probably quite dehydrated, maybe hungry, heat stroke was very, very likely, and the things they were seeing were shapes moving in the water beneath them. It's very easy to see why they thought maybe it was mermaids. In reality, it was more likely manatees or beluga whales, which is why they might have looked like these beautiful mermaids swimming in the water, but if they got close to the surface, they thought they had the face of men. I think that's quite funny. So that is the wider history of mermaids around the world. Absolutely not complete at all. There are so many more stories out there, and I do recommend you go and do a little bit of reading yourself, a little bit of research. I'll leave a few links and stuff and references and resources for more reading you can do down in the video description, but go out there, do some Googling. I thoroughly recommend it. It's a fascinating topic. But for now, let's talk about the story of The Little Mermaid itself. So the animated Disney film released back in 1989 was very loosely based on Hans Christian Andersen's 1837 story, also called The Little Mermaid. Now, Hans was from Denmark, and the original Little Mermaid story was published in Denmark. And that's why you get some people saying today, well, to respect the origin, it only makes sense that Ariel looks like a Danish person, you know. That's why she's always had red hair and white skin. Except, I don't really think that argument makes a lot of sense, because, yeah, while most people in Denmark at the time were white, not many had ginger hair. Only around 2% of the population, in fact. And none of that 2% had fire engine red hair. They didn't look like this. You wouldn't think of the typical Danish woman as looking anything like 80s Ariel at all. So, to say this is like a depiction of the culture that Hans was writing in is completely incorrect. And secondly, Disney did stray so far from the source material in their interpretation that I don't see what a difference a change of appearance to Ariel actually makes. The 1989 film and today's live-action film are inspired by Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale, but not a direct retelling of it. And there's probably a good reason for that, because the original fairy tale was dark as hell. So, let's have a think about what the 1989 story was, the Disney version. Basically, you have a young mermaid, nice singing voice, she's cool, a little bit scatterbrained, has an obsession with hoarding human things and watching humans. She helps rescue a young sailor in a storm, falls madly in love with him, makes a deal with a sea witch to get legs so she can go on land and meet him. In return, the sea witch takes her voice. The deal is Ariel must make Prince Eric fall in love with her, even though she's completely mute, otherwise she loses her voice forever. Ursula, the sea witch, also takes human form to try and seduce the prince, so Ariel will lose, but in the end, true love wins out. Ariel and Eric end up falling in love, she keeps her legs and her voice, they all live happily ever after, except Ursula, because screw that bitch, she's the bad guy, it's a Disney film. That's it. That's the 1989 Disney version of The Little Mermaid. I imagine the new film will follow a very similar structure, but might add a few changes of its own if the other live-action remakes are anything to go by. We might see some more subplots in there, we might see some new characters, we might see a different interpretation on things, who knows? And that's absolutely okay, because as we said earlier, stories like this, myths, legends, fairy tales, they have always grown and changed over time. They've always been altered to appeal more to a specific audience or culture that it was being told in at the time. As times changed, as people's needs and wants changed, as the lessons they needed to learn from these stories changed, as the messages of hope they needed from these stories changed, the stories changed with them, and that is completely normal. And we have to remember that there's, 30 odd years between this and the last Little Mermaid film? In the whole of human history, that's not a big amount of time, but when you think about how much culture's changed in this time, then yeah, it makes sense that the story of The Little Mermaid would change with it. So how different was the 1989 Disney version from Hans Christian Andersen's story? Well, very. And there's a good reason for that, because I don't think many parents would let their children watch a realistic or animated film portrayal of the original story. It is dark. So in the Hans Christian Andersen version, in the ocean, there lives a young mermaid alongside her father, her grandmother, and her many, many, many sisters. The Little Mermaid in our story, who is only ever called the Little Mermaid, she's not given a name, she's not called Ariel, she is just the Little Mermaid. She is the youngest of her sisters, and she is said to have the most beautiful voice in the entire world. Now, what you need to know as a little background to this story is that in this world, mermaids can live for up to 300 years in the oceans, but unlike humans who have a shorter life but whose soul lives forever, when a mermaid dies, their souls just disappear forever. Their bodies are turned to foam and return to the sea. And that is it. That is the end of them. When a human dies, their soul lives on forever. It goes on to the afterlife. You know, there's more, even though their physical bodies are gone. For a mermaid, they have a longer physical life, but then that's it. Dead. Done. No soul, gone. So our Little Mermaid is the youngest of all her sisters, and she has spent her whole life hearing their stories of the human world, which is why she cannot wait for her 15th birthday, when it'll be her turn to be allowed to swim up to the ocean surface and watch the human world just for a little while. She cannot wait. And when the day arrives, one of the first things she sees is this large ship with this beautiful, handsome prince on it. And he's partying, he's good looking, he's clearly rich, and she thinks, damn, I want a bit of that. It's very, very Romeo and Juliet in that you have young people mistaking lust and attraction for everlasting love, you know? Typical story we've all seen and read many times, and in typical, hormonal, love-crazed teenager, this 15-year-old teenage mermaid decides that although she knows nothing about this man's personality or background, she's never spoken to him, she doesn't even know how old he is, she doesn't know his name, she has decided that she loves him. She has seen him once and she loves him, and she wants to be with him, and she will marry this man. And as she's watching her prince party and falling in love with him, the storm hits absolutely out of nowhere. The boat is damaged, the hot prince is tossed into the ocean, and our little mermaid thinks, oh my god, I need to save him. So she goes swimming up to him, pulls him out of the water, drags him onto the beach, and she realizes that he's hit his head, he's unconscious, she needs to do something, but she can't stay out of the water for too long, she's a mermaid. So she has to go back in, and as she does, this other woman comes walking along the beach and finds him. At this point, he wakes up and he has this vague, wishy-washy idea that, oh, there's a woman in front of me, I know someone saved me from the water, it must have been you. You saved me from the storm. And she's like, yeah, that was me. I saved you. I'll take all the credit. Meanwhile, back in the ocean, our little mermaid has decided she is now so completely in love with this man who she met while he was unconscious for all of 5 minutes. She has decided that she wants to be with him forever. Species differences be damned. So she goes to seek out the legendary sea witch, who again, noticed is not named Ursula, does not have a name, she is just the sea witch. And the sea witch agrees to help the little mermaid to get on land to meet her prince in exchange for her voice, which we all know is the most beautiful voice in the world. So this mermaid is giving up a hell of a lot for her prince. The mermaid agrees, and the sea witch immediately takes her voice by cutting out her tongue. Physically cutting it out. It's bloody, it's messy, it's painful, it's very, very graphic, and this whole transformation only gets worse. The sea witch then hands over a potion which the little mermaid drinks, and it physically splits her fin in two down the middle to create legs. It's painful. So the mermaid, with her cut out tongue and split fin, swims up to the surface of the water and finally reaches land. And as she goes on land, her split fin transforms into human-looking legs, but every single step is like walking on sharp knives. She feels it in every inch of her legs, her body, constant pain, her feet bleed constantly, and she has no tongue, so she can't speak, she can't tell anyone in how much pain she is. And the problem is that now, even though she has a human body, she still has a mermaid soul. And because of the deal with the sea witch, if she wants a human soul, if she wants to live eternally with her prince, the deal with the sea witch states that she has to get him to fall in love with her and marry her so that they can share a human soul. If the mermaid fails at this task, if the prince doesn't fall in love with her, if the prince marries someone else, the mermaid will die immediately the next day and turn to foam, her soul gone forever. So the stakes are a little higher than in the Disney version, I'll be honest. Luckily for our mermaid though, or so it seems, the prince is just as shallow as she is, so she makes her way on land in pain every step of the way to the palace where she meets the prince, and immediately he sees her and he's like, damn, I want a bit of that. So she is so stunningly beautiful, he is just obsessed with her. Again, very Romeo and Juliet, and immediately he starts taking her to parties, to balls, parading her around, dancing with her, telling her that she's the most beautiful woman he's ever seen, you know, showering her with kind words and flirtation and gifts and all this sort of thing. He adores dancing with her. He dances with her for hours at a time, and she goes along with it. She puts up with it even though she is in constant pain and cannot even begin to express how much pain she's in. He basically treats her as a prop, an object. He parades her around as this beautiful woman on his arm, but never really has a real connection with her. She can't speak, they don't know anything about each other. He just thinks she's beautiful and shows her off. Meanwhile, she's suffering, she's in pain, she's like... he has no idea how uncomfortable she is, how much she's suffering, and she just goes along with it because she thinks this is what she has to do to marry this man. And if she doesn't marry this man, she's nothing, she's foam, she's gone. It's a very intense and interesting commentary on societal expectations of relationships and gender roles at the time, and for that reason I do think this is a story that is still very relevant today. A woman learns she's nothing if she doesn't marry a man, so she has to put herself in uncomfortable and painful situations to go along with what he wants, just so he might marry her in the end. After a few nights of dancing and no talking and flirting and him basically using her for whatever he wants, his parents come to him and say, "Prince, enough of this, it's time to get married." And because he is the prince, of course he has to marry for politics. They say there's a princess from a neighbouring kingdom who they need him to marry so that they can unite the kingdoms. But the prince says, "No, I will not. I will only marry for love, and I love another. I want to marry another." And at this point, our Little Mermaid is like, finally, it's happening. It's all coming true. His parents aren't happy, but he's like, "No, I'm the prince, and I stand by what I say." Except there's a twist, because the prince isn't in love with our Little Mermaid. He isn't in love with this woman he's been parading around and dancing with and flirting with for days now. He's not in love with the woman who sacrificed everything for him. No, he tells her he could never love her. He just wants her to be a pretty ornament on his arm for a while. She's not the kind of woman a prince marries. The only woman he could love is the woman who saved him from the storm. And that is the woman that he loves. He's like, yes, if I'm going to marry someone, it needs to be a woman who will sacrifice herself for me, who will save me, who will have my back. I love her and I want to marry her. Now, of course, we know this woman isn't actually the one who saved the prince. The Little Mermaid is. So we think, well, this woman's taking credit and the prince fully believes it was her and has fallen for her. But in any good fairy tale, justice occurs, right? The truth will come out. The prince will surely find out that the Little Mermaid is the one who saved him, and he'll fall for her instead, and they'll live happily ever after, and screw this other woman who's lied and taken all the credit, right? But no, because in another twist, it turns out that the woman who was walking along the beach, who took the credit for saving the prince, even though she didn't, is in fact the princess from the neighbouring kingdom. So the prince is like, well, I love her. The parents are like, we want you to marry her. And he's like, mate, let's do it. And so they get married. Truth be damned. Understandably, our mermaid is heartbroken. She is distraught. She loved this man. She gave up her voice for him. She endured pain every single day for him. She gave up her family for him, her life for him, and he has just thrown it away. And now she is going to be nothing. She is literally going to turn to foam. And so the night of the wedding, she sits by the sea and waits to die. But then, because this story is full of exciting twists, remember, suddenly the mermaid sisters appear in the ocean in front of her. They too have been to see the sea witch and made a deal on her behalf. Each of her sisters gave up their beautiful, stunning, long, gorgeous hair in exchange for a knife. All the Little Mermaid has to do is take this knife from the sea witch and kill the prince with it, and then, with his blood, drip it on her legs and feet. At this point, her tail will be restored, and she'll be back to being a mermaid again, and she can go back into the ocean and live the rest of her long, happy life with her family. She's only 15. She's still got another, 285 years ahead of her. She is so young. And suddenly this story turns into a tale of bloody revenge and justice, and except no, it doesn't. Because despite the prince being a silly, shallow user of women who made this Little Mermaid suffer, who treated her so badly, who used her, she still loves him, and she couldn't possibly kill him. And so the sisters made a sacrifice for their ungrateful little sister for absolutely nothing. She says, screw this, and she throws a knife in the ocean, and just as the sun begins to rise the next morning, she turns to foam and is washed away by the sea. However, in another twist, because this mermaid has had a tumultuous 15 years, there is a slightly happy ending as it turns out, because unlike most mermaids, she's not dead. Her soul hasn't just she didn't have a soul to disappear. Instead, the mermaid becomes an air spirit and is told that she has a chance to earn an eternal soul by doing good deeds for humans for the next 300 years. And so she agrees to do that, and that's where the story ends. So I guess there's that. Moral of the story, I would say, don't fall for a man you don't know. Don't give up your life and allow yourself to be hurt for some man. Don't keep going back to abusive men just because you love them, because they never change. They don't. They absolutely don't. At least that's what I choose to take away from this story. I do actually think it's a really amazing story, and it's so much more complex than the Disney version, and it's really interesting because remaking this video 3 years on, and with what I've experienced in these last 3 years, I feel like this story now speaks to me on a whole different level, and I find myself in some ways more frustrated than ever by the mermaid's character and choices and actions, but I also find myself understanding her more than I did, you know, back when I was like, what, 26 or so? Because I understand her, because in those moments when you love someone or you think you love someone and they tell you that you have no other option but to stay and love them, it really does feel impossible to put yourself first and walk away. So I understand why she couldn't kill the prince at the end, but logically I still know she was wrong. So in that case, I think it's a very important story to tell. It's a great cautionary tale. Excellent. And unlike the Disney version, I think there's a lot more grey areas in this story. It's not just everything's black and white, good guys, bad guys. In this story, everyone has their flaws, you know? The sea witch is the person who takes the mermaid's tongue. She does inflict pain on her, she does take the sister's hair, but she is offering them what they want and what they ask for. They didn't have to agree to these deals, but they did. She even gives the mermaid a second chance with this second deal, you know? The witch wasn't underhanded or sneaky in this story, she was literally just doing her job. So is she really all that bad? I don't think she's the villain in this story at all. I think the prince is. The Little Mermaid is young and naive and idealistic, and for that reason she seems very real and we can't really fault her for that. But also she is very silly and she is very shallow, and they are things that we can't fault her for. But you also have to remember that to some extent she is the victim of this shallow prince who used and abused her and tricked her into thinking he was going to fall in love with her and marry her, and you can't really blame her for not understanding that she needs to get away from him. She's only 15 and we have no idea how old he is, but he's old enough to get married and be partying on a ship and all this other stuff. So I would argue that she is just a young, naive, basically still a child who has been used and manipulated by an older man. So you can't really blame her for some of her actions in this. I remember when I first made the video on this topic back in 2019, I was way more, I guess, sympathetic towards the prince. I remember asking, like, can we really blame the prince for not falling for the mermaid? Because it's not like she could speak to him. They couldn't communicate, he knew nothing about her. How could he fall for her? But now I have way less sympathy for him because he's shallow, he's thoughtless, he doesn't care for anyone's needs but his own. And even though he had no connection with her, he couldn't talk to her, there was no communication, he still led her on. He still used her. He still treated her like an object and put her through pain for his own pleasure. And he was oblivious to her pain. I think, like, if someone's like grimacing in pain in the face, you would at least notice that. And he just didn't, because he was so wrapped up in his own little world and his own needs, he didn't care about anyone else. And then once he'd had his fun with her, once he'd used her, he just tossed her aside like nothing. Didn't care what happened to her, probably didn't even know what happened to her. I would say the prince is the main villain in this. He is an abuser, and I don't like him. And as for the princess that the prince ended up marrying, it's not like she actively did anything to get rid of the mermaid or anything, and you could say it wasn't her fault that the prince chose her instead, but she did take credit for someone else's actions in saying, yeah, mate, I'm the one who saved you from the boat. That's not great. But I think ultimately I just feel sorry for her because I think she's going to end up a victim in all of this too, you know? The prince claimed he loved her, that she was the only one he could love, that he was going to marry her, all while dancing and flirting, all while parading around with this beautiful little mermaid on his arm, you know? He has no loyalty, he's not trustworthy. I think this poor little princess is going to suffer in the long term, being married to him. I do feel sorry for her in that respect. So there you go. That's my analysis of the story, but I would love to know what you think. In conclusion, as you can see, Disney made a hell of a lot of changes to the original story to make it more appropriate for their target audience and to change the message for their target audience, to teach their target audience different things, and so on. And I see absolutely nothing wrong with continuing to evolve the story and its portrayal in other interpretations. We don't have to stick to the same story, the same message, the same characters all the time. Stories and myths, as we've seen, can and do evolve, and that's a really, really good thing. And honestly, where's the fun in just a shot-for-shot exact remake of the animated film? No, give me something new. Give me some new dimensions. Give me a new story, a new character, and give me a new interpretation of it, you know? And in that case, I think Halle's portrayal of Ariel is going to be exciting. It's going to be new, and I do actually really want to see it, and I think it could be a fantastic thing. And so to conclude, I think therefore anyone who has complaints about the casting of this film is just just a stuffy old racist who knows nothing about the wonderfully diverse and fascinating history of mermaids around the world. And maybe if they took their heads out of their bums for just a moment, they would be better educated, less boring, and just nicer people. And I think it's a shame. There we go. Also, sorry, my tummy's rumbling because I'm really, really hungry and I've not eaten today, so I'm sorry if the microphone's picking that up. But I'm going to go have a snack now. But thank you for watching today. I appreciate you a hell of a lot. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you for sticking around today. If you watched the original video and you're watching this one, thank you for taking the time. I do appreciate it. Hopefully this one was better. We'll see. If you're new here, it'd be great if you subscribe. If you like this video, please feel free to share it around. Leave a comment because it really helps with engagement and getting my video to be pushed out there by the algorithm and seen by more people, which is always fantastic. And for now, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again really, really soon. Very smart. Very smart, aren't you? The smartest, some might say. Including me, I would say. Love you, smart girl. Oh, I haven't got lipstick on. Will you go fetch my lipstick for me, please? That's not lipstick, that's your tongue. Silly one. You silly sausage. You silly little sausages, aren't you? Hey, Coops. Today we're going to be talking about mermaids. Are you a mermaid? Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Love you.